when a spiritually awakened woman faces disrespect. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Carl Jung. There comes a moment in every awakened woman's journey when silence is no longer submission, it becomes strength. When she faces disrespect, she doesn't react. She reflects. She doesn't chase validation. She reclaims her energy. This is not rebellion, it's evolution. In today's episode on spiritual wisdom, we'll explore what truly happens when a spiritually awakened woman confronts disrespect and how she turns pain into power, boundaries into peace, and awareness into freedom. As you listen, ask yourself, how do you respond when your spirit is tested? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's grow together in spiritual strength and emotional mastery. 1. Conscious emotional sovereignty over reaction. A spiritually awakened woman no longer fractures in the presence of disrespect, for she understands that spirituality is not about avoiding pain, but transforming it. When faced with words or actions that would once have ignited her wounds, she now pauses. She feels the sting rise within her chest, yet does not let it define her. She observes it as energy moving, transient, and separate from her identity. This is what Carl Jung described as conscious suffering, the ability to experience pain without becoming enslaved by it. She breathes deeply, anchors herself in awareness, and allows emotions to flow through her instead of reacting impulsively. Her spiritual awakening has taught her that true strength is quiet, that dignity does not shout, and that every moment of disrespect is an initiation into deeper emotional mastery. She recognizes that every reaction is a choice, and that sovereignty begins when she claims authorship of her inner state. In moments where her worth feels questioned, she returns to her breath, remembering that silence born from wisdom is far louder than a voice raised from pain. Instead of mirroring disrespect, she becomes the mirror of composure. She knows that emotional maturity means being able to sit with discomfort without projecting it outward. She watches her own impulses with compassion and discipline, understanding that each trigger reveals where old wounds still seek healing. Through awareness, she transforms reaction into reflection and pain into power. This practice of conscious emotional sovereignty becomes her daily spiritual ritual. She no longer allows others to dictate her emotional climate. When someone disrespects her, she does not rush to defend or attack. She listens with discernment, not ego. She may respond later, calmly and clearly, when her energy is grounded. She says only what serves truth, never what feeds chaos. She understands that energy management is the essence of spirituality, knowing when to speak, when to step back, and when to let silence do the teaching. As Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Her awakening has made the unconscious conscious. She notices her bodily sensations, the quickened heartbeat, the tightening throat, the heat rising to her face. But instead of letting these sensations rule her, she studies them like sacred texts. They remind her that she is human, not immune to hurt, but capable of choosing a higher response. She no longer interprets disrespect as a reflection of her value, but as feedback about another state of awareness. Thus, her compassion deepens, but her boundaries remain firm. She can forgive without excusing, love without tolerating, and walk away without hatred. Her spiritual awakening has turned her pain into her teacher. Every slight, every careless word becomes an opportunity to return to her center. She knows that reacting gives her power away, while responding consciously preserves her energy and self-worth. So she reclaims the sacred pause, the moment between feeling and response, as her throne of sovereignty. This is the quiet revolution of the awakened woman. She feels everything, yet she is ruled by nothing. In her stillness lives her strength. In her awareness lives her freedom. And in her refusal to let disrespect distort her peace, she becomes the living embodiment of spiritual wisdom, an unshakable force of consciousness, grace, and divine self-respect. Have you ever faced disrespect and chosen peace instead of reaction? If so, share your story in the comments below. Your experience might inspire someone today. And if you're still learning to master your emotional sovereignty, comment, "I choose calm over chaos," to begin your journey of spiritual awakening and self-respect. 2. Emotional triggers as portals for inner healing. Disrespect is not just an insult, it is a mirror that reveals the wounds still unhealed within you. When someone disrespects you, it triggers echoes of old pain buried deep in your subconscious. Instead of directing your energy toward the person who hurt you, spirituality invites you to turn inward and ask yourself, what old pain is being activated? In moments like these, the spiritually awakened woman does not react impulsively. She pauses, breathes, and observes the emotion rising inside her. She understands that disrespect is not random. It is a sacred signal, guiding her toward the next layer of her spiritual development. As Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Every emotional trigger is a call from your inner child, a request to look closer, to heal the parts of yourself that still remember being silenced, rejected, or overlooked. When you shift your attention from judgment to awareness, disrespect becomes a teacher instead of a threat. You begin to see how projection operates, and you recognize that what you accuse others of might be reflecting your own fears and insecurities. The awakened woman uses this awareness not to blame, but to grow. She studies the emotions that surface and listens to their message. Each moment of discomfort becomes an opportunity for transformation, a step deeper into authenticity. This is the essence of spiritual development, learning to respond instead of react, to observe without being consumed, to see pain as an ally rather than an enemy. By staying present with your emotions, you dissolve the illusions that feed your suffering. Presence teaches you that no external disrespect can define your worth. It can only expose where your boundaries have been too flexible or where your self-respect needs reinforcement. In spirituality, strength does not mean hardness. It means softness with direction. You can forgive without allowing access, love without losing yourself, and walk away without bitterness. The spiritually awakened woman learns that forgiveness without boundaries is not love. It is self-abandonment. Her growth lies in her ability to stand firm in her truth while keeping her heart open. She knows that grace is not about tolerating harm, but about transmuting pain into wisdom. When you face disrespect, see it as an emotional mirror showing where you still need to protect and honor yourself. Breathe before reacting. Name what you feel and trace it back to its roots. Was it a memory of being ignored as a child, or a time when your voice was dismissed? These reflections illuminate the path toward inner freedom. Once you tend to those old wounds with compassion, disrespect loses its power over you. What once would have shattered your peace now becomes fuel for your awakening. Through each trigger, you refine your energy, clarify your standards, and embody a higher vibration. True spiritual development means no longer outsourcing your self-worth to others. You no longer need external validation to feel valuable. When disrespect arises, you stay calm because you understand the lesson. It is not about changing others, but about mastering your own energy. Healing through these emotional portals leads you to profound self-respect. You start treating yourself with the same reverence you once demanded from others. This is when spirituality becomes embodied, not an abstract belief, but a living practice of peace, power, and presence. The lesson is simple yet profound. Every emotional trigger is a teacher. Let disrespect remind you to return home to your breath, your body, and your boundaries. Honor your emotions without drowning in them. Speak your truth with clarity, not cruelty. Choose presence over reaction, because every time you do, you rise higher in your spiritual development, turning pain into purpose and wounds into wisdom. 3. Letting go of the need to explain or prove worth. When a spiritually awakened woman faces disrespect, she no longer tries to explain herself, prove her worth, or beg for recognition. She has learned through spiritual wisdom that her energy speaks louder than words. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And when she fully embodies that truth, she no longer needs to defend it. She understands that not everyone has the consciousness to perceive her depth, and that people see only from the level of their own awareness. Trying to make them understand would only drain her spirit. So instead of wasting energy on explanations, she chooses peace. She lets her silence speak volumes, and that silence becomes her language of power. She realizes that the need to justify herself is a remnant of her unhealed self, a shadow of the girl who once needed to be seen. But now she sees herself clearly. Through her awakening, she recognizes that over-explaining is a form of self-abandonment, a way of seeking permission to exist. She stops doing that. She chooses dignity over validation, calm over chaos, and truth over approval. When someone disrespects her, she no longer reacts with emotion or tries to convince them otherwise. Instead, she observes with awareness, knowing that disrespect is not a reflection of her inadequacy, but of another person's limitation. She understood what Jung meant when he said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." So she lets every moment of disrespect become a mirror, a teacher, and a chance to refine her boundaries. The more she grows, the less she feels the urge to defend her energy. She learns that self-worth doesn't need proof, it radiates naturally through presence. Her silence, her composure, and her ability to walk away without resentment are now her greatest strengths. The awakened woman no longer seeks peace from others. She becomes peace itself. And when she walks away, she doesn't do it to punish anyone. She does it to honor her spirit. This act of quiet withdrawal becomes her highest form of self-respect. She understands that walking away is not a loss, but a declaration. My energy is sacred, and I will not spend it explaining what only awakened hearts can feel. Through this spiritual awakening, she embodies the wisdom Carl Jung spent a lifetime exploring, the process of individuation, of becoming whole and integrated within herself. She doesn't need the world to recognize her anymore because she has recognized herself. And that inner recognition gives her the strength to move through life with unshakable grace. Disrespect no longer breaks her. It reveals how deeply she is healed. Her energy, her stillness, and her authenticity now speak louder than any defense ever could. And in this quiet mastery, she discovers that the most powerful language a woman can ever speak is silence shaped by spiritual wisdom. Comment below, "I no longer need to prove my worth." If you're ready to embody this truth and rise in your spiritual power, let this be your affirmation of freedom and self-respect. 4. Boundaries are embodied, not just spoken. A spiritually awakened woman no longer wastes energy trying to convince others of her worth because she embodies it in every breath, gesture, and silence. Her power is not in words, but in presence. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And she has lived long enough in self-denial to understand that becoming her true self requires no justification. She no longer explains why she deserves respect. Her energy declares it. When her spirit senses dissonance, her body feels it first. A tightening in the chest, a sinking in the gut, a subtle contraction that tells her something is off. She has learned to honor that signal as sacred guidance. This is not arrogance, but deep spiritual wisdom, a recognition that the body is the temple through which the soul speaks. So when she withdraws from places where her peace is disturbed, she isn't avoiding conflict, she's choosing alignment. Her silence, her stillness, her graceful exit all speak louder than any confrontation could. She understands that boundaries are not things she needs to announce. They are energies she inhabits. This realization is born from her journey through spiritual awakening, where she learned that every act of self-abandonment is a quiet form of self-betrayal. Instead of forcing connection or proving her goodness, she lets go with love. Her departure is her declaration that not every space deserves her sacred presence. She no longer stays in rooms where her intuition whispers, "Leave." Jung believed that the body is not separate from the psyche. It is its living expression, and she embodies that truth effortlessly. Her spiritual boundaries are not imagined or spoken. They are felt. You can sense them in the way she enters a room, calm but unshakable, soft yet invincible. Those who are attuned can feel her energy before she speaks, an aura of clarity that commands respect without demand. She no longer confuses compassion with tolerance. Through spirituality, she has learned that peace cannot exist where her soul feels unseen. So when disrespect appears, she doesn't react, she removes. Her withdrawal is not weakness, but wisdom, a subtle alchemy of the soul that transforms pain into power. There is no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung reminded us, and she has transmuted that pain into awareness. She knows that arguing for her worth only diminishes it, so she allows her energy to teach the lesson her words no longer need to. When her body says no, she listens. When her spirit says it's time, she goes. Her absence becomes her boundary, and her peace becomes her proof. In this state of spiritual awakening, she radiates a quiet authority that no one can fake. Her essence itself becomes her language, her vibration, her message. She no longer needs to control how others perceive her, because her focus has turned inward to the divine equilibrium that comes when one is fully aligned with self-respect. Her boundaries are the invisible architecture of her freedom. formed not from ego, but from self-honor. She embodies the truth that love without respect is an illusion, and peace without boundaries is impossible. And through every choice she makes to honor her energy, she reminds the world of what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." She has made her unconscious conscious, and now her energy itself speaks her truth, clear, grounded, untouchable. 5. Withdrawal is wisdom, not weakness. Withdrawal is wisdom, not weakness. When you choose to walk away from disrespect, you are not abandoning love. You are choosing alignment. You are not running from confrontation. You are rising above confusion. Conscious withdrawal from toxic relationships is not a collapse of strength, but a declaration of self-respect, a sacred turning inward that protects your peace and restores your power. In spirituality and spiritual development, this act becomes a form of prayer, a silent vow to no longer betray yourself for the sake of belonging. An awakened woman knows that what drains her energy cannot carry her toward destiny. She no longer clings to people or places that dim her light, because she understands that attachment without reciprocity is spiritual erosion. Carl Jung once said, "Individuation means becoming who you truly are, even if it means disappointing others." To live this truth is to let go of the illusion that harmony requires self-abandonment. It means learning that peace is not maintained by constant compromise, but by the courage to stand in authenticity. When you step back from disrespect, you are not creating distance. You are creating space for your soul to breathe. You stop explaining yourself to those who only listen to argue, and you stop begging for validation from those committed to misunderstanding you. This quiet withdrawal is not coldness, it is clarity. You recognize that not every battle deserves your fire, and not every connection deserves your presence. In this stillness, your nervous system begins to recover. You sleep deeper. You smile easier. You remember what it feels like to be safe in your own energy. You begin to fill your life with peace rather than noise, and you start to attract people who speak the same emotional language as your spirit. That is spiritual maturity, the point where you no longer seek to convince, but to coexist, no longer chase closure, but embody completion. And when guilt rises, whisper to it, "I am choosing peace, not punishment. I am choosing to honor the divine within me." Your boundaries are not walls. They are gates that protect sacred ground. Your silence is not surrender, it is strength. And your distance is not rejection, it is redirection. Spiritual development teaches you that walking away can be the loudest form of love for yourself, for your truth, and even for those who are not yet ready to meet you where you stand. Each act of withdrawal becomes a seed of renewal. You are not losing anyone. You are finding yourself. You are not ending something. You are evolving beyond it. You are not closing a chapter in fear. You are writing a new one in faith. You do not owe lifelong access to those who repeatedly dishonor your spirit. You owe yourself protection, rest, and grace. You owe your energy to the spaces where it is respected, not drained. To withdraw is to remember your worth without needing permission. To walk away is to choose growth over guilt. To stay aligned is to live as the woman you were always meant to become whole, peaceful, and free. If this message resonates with your spirit, take a moment to like, subscribe, and share your reflections in the comments below. Let's walk this journey of spiritual wisdom together, remembering that withdrawal is not weakness, but the purest form of strength. 6. Disrespect as alchemical fuel for transformation. When a spiritually awakened woman encounters disrespect, she doesn't crumble under its weight. She transforms it. To her, disrespect is not a curse, but an alchemical ingredient, a sacred substance that can be transmuted into wisdom, strength, and clarity. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain," and she lives by this truth. She understands that every painful encounter, every cutting word, and every dismissive gesture holds within it the potential for awakening. Instead of reacting with bitterness, she becomes still. She observes without judgment, seeing that the one who disrespects her is often trapped within their own unconscious shadows. Through spiritual wisdom, she recognizes that people project what they cannot accept within themselves, and this recognition frees her from taking their behavior personally. Rather than drowning in emotional turmoil, she channels that energy inward, using it as fuel to refine her soul and strengthen her inner foundation. Disrespect, for her, becomes a teacher dressed in disguise. It reveals where her boundaries need fortifying and where remnants of self-doubt still live within her. Each moment of disrespect is like fire meeting gold. It burns away illusions and purifies her essence. She no longer seeks to convince others of her worth, because her worth is not negotiable. Instead, she stands firm, dignified, and untouchable. She has learned that silence can speak louder than defense, and that walking away can be the most powerful declaration of self-respect. When people attempt to devalue her, they unknowingly hand her the tools to rise higher. The sting that once broke her now awakens her. The rejection that once wounded her now liberates her. She begins to understand that life's most painful experiences are not punishments, but invitations to step deeper into her power. Jung's alchemical metaphor beautifully describes her journey. She takes the lead of suffering and transforms it into the gold of understanding. The process is not easy. It requires awareness, courage, and faith. But through spiritual awakening, she realizes that disrespect is never about her. It's a mirror reflecting the other person's unresolved pain. This understanding dissolves resentment and replaces it with compassion. Not pity, but compassion rooted in strength. The kind that says, "I see your darkness, but I will not let it touch my light." She learns that true empowerment does not come from control, but from emotional sovereignty. The more she masters her reactions, the more she becomes unshakable. She understands that to be disrespected and still remain in peace is the highest form of spiritual maturity. Through this alchemical process, the awakened woman becomes her own healer and her own protector. Her energy no longer bends to external chaos. It expands with grace. She walks with quiet confidence, knowing that every trial has shaped her into someone unbreakable. Her wisdom radiates through her calmness. She no longer needs to fight for respect because her very presence demands it. Every act of disrespect she has endured becomes a stepping stone toward mastery. Each lesson refining her emotional intelligence and deepening her spiritual wisdom. She forgives not because she condones the harm, but because she refuses to let bitterness occupy her heart. Forgiveness, for her, is freedom. She embodies Jung's insight that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And in facing disrespect, she has become just that, an alchemist of her own soul, turning pain into gold, shadow into light, and disrespect into divine transformation. 7. From external validation to inner authority. A spiritually awakened woman no longer seeks to be validated by the world because she has already found what the world cannot give herself. She has walked through the fire of disappointment, judgment, and misunderstanding and has come out with something more precious than approval: inner authority. Her worth is no longer negotiable. It does not rise or fall with someone's opinion, nor does it shrink when others fail to see her light. As Carl Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And through her spiritual awakening, she has discovered that truth in its raw, liberating form. When others disrespect her, she no longer reacts with pain, but with perception. She sees their behavior as a reflection of their own unconscious shadows, not as a mirror of her value. The disrespect that once cut deep now only clarifies her discernment. It shows her who to trust, who to release, and where to protect her peace. Her transformation is the embodiment of spirituality in motion. She no longer needs to explain herself or prove her goodness to be accepted. The silence that once felt heavy with loneliness now feels rich with divine companionship. She moves differently, speaks differently, and carries herself with a grace that comes from knowing she no longer has anything to prove. Jung called this the realization of the self, a sacred union between the conscious and the unconscious, the light and the shadow. From this inner harmony, her quiet strength begins to radiate. People may not understand why she feels different, but they can sense it. Her presence has a magnetic calm that draws respect without demanding it. Her power is subtle yet undeniable. It's in her eyes, her energy, her refusal to be moved by chaos. This is spiritual wisdom in its purest form, a state where one no longer needs to control the world because one has mastered the self. Every experience of disrespect becomes alchemy for her soul. Instead of internalizing others' projections, she transmutes them into self-awareness. She understands that every judgment she receives reveals something about the one who gives it, not the one who receives it. She no longer needs to fight, explain, or conform. Her boundaries are clear, her energy sacred, and her silence powerful. When someone tries to diminish her, she does not shrink. She expands inwardly. She listens, not to defend herself, but to understand where compassion can replace resentment. As Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Through awakening, she has brought her unconscious wounds into the light, and now they no longer control her. They serve her growth. She no longer measures her worth through comparison or competition. The approval she once sought from others has been replaced by an unshakable trust in divine timing and inner truth. Her peace no longer depends on circumstances because she lives from the inside out. This is not arrogance, but alignment, not pride, but presence. When she faces disrespect now, she does not fall into despair. She observes it like a passing cloud and returns to the stillness of her own being. Her energy teaches what her words do not, that true empowerment is silent, grounded, and sovereign. She is not driven by ego, but guided by spirit. She is not fighting for recognition, but radiating understanding. And in doing so, she becomes living proof of what Jung described as individuation, the full integration of one's soul, the point where authenticity replaces approval and peace becomes power. To affirm your devotion to inner authority, speak it into existence. Comment below, "I trust my inner voice," as a declaration that you no longer need external validation. Let your words remind others that true power begins within. When a spiritually awakened woman faces disrespect, she no longer reacts from pain, she responds from awareness. She understands that every insult reveals more about the other person's inner conflict than her own worth. True awakening is not about fighting back, but about standing firm in grace, clarity, and self-respect. Remember, your light does not dim when others fail to see it. It simply exposes what they have yet to heal. If this message resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. And turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos on spirituality, transformation, and inner awakening. Carl Jung warned about the danger of seeing what others can't. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Carl Jung. There comes a time in every seeker's life when seeing what others cannot is both a blessing and a burden. When your awareness expands beyond the surface, you begin to perceive hidden motives, unspoken emotions, and subtle energies that most overlook. Jung warned that such perception demands responsibility. It's not just about seeing deeper truths, but learning how to live with them without losing your peace. As you listen to this message, ask yourself, how do you handle what your soul sees that others don't? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's explore together how spiritual wisdom can help us turn heightened awareness into strength, compassion, and inner balance. 1. The gift of clear seeing is also a curse. Some people are born with heightened perception. They can sense the unspoken emotions, tensions, and hidden truths in others. Society calls this intuition or empathy a gift. But Carl Jung warned that this form of deep perception carries danger within it. Once you begin to see beneath illusions, you cannot unsee. The eyes of the spirit never close, and the heart that awakens can no longer return to the comfort of ignorance. This is the paradox of spiritual awakening. The more you see, the more isolated you may feel, because few can understand the depth of what you perceive. When your awareness expands, you start noticing what others overlook: the subtle shifts in energy, the falseness behind smiles, the loneliness behind laughter. Spirituality teaches that the awakened soul moves through the world like a mirror, reflecting truth without distortion. But that clarity can be unsettling to those still attached to illusion. You begin to realize that truth is not always beautiful, and that the human mind clings to lies for safety. Seeing through masks means losing the comfort of naivete, and suddenly the world feels heavier, more fragile, more real. Jung warned that such perception can lead to despair, or pride despair, because you feel the pain of humanity too deeply, and pride because you might mistake your awareness for superiority. Yet true spiritual wisdom lies in holding vision with humility, seeing darkness without becoming it, understanding without judging. To see what others can't is not a privilege to boast about, but a responsibility to carry with grace. This level of perception demands emotional discipline. the ability to witness suffering without drowning in it, to feel others' pain without absorbing it. The spiritually awake walk between worlds, the visible and the invisible, the known and the mysterious. Their senses pick up frequencies that ordinary minds filter out, and this can be overwhelming. But in every burden lies purpose. The danger Jung spoke of is not the act of seeing itself, but losing one's balance in the process. When people around you deny what you clearly perceive, you begin to doubt yourself, to wonder if you are too sensitive or too strange. Yet, in truth, your sensitivity is your compass. It allows you to navigate the emotional landscapes of others and understand the hidden architecture of human behavior. Spirituality reminds us that awakening is not about escaping the world, but perceiving it as it truly is. The moment you see beyond illusion, life demands more honesty from you in thought, in speech, in action. You can no longer lie to yourself, no longer participate in games of pretense. This is where the gift becomes sacred, when vision turns into compassion and awareness becomes service. The spiritually awake are called not to judge those who still sleep, but to illuminate their path quietly through presence and understanding. Seeing what others can't is both a burden and a blessing. It strips away false comfort, but replaces it with divine truth. Carl Jung understood that once the eyes of the soul are open, they can never close again. To see deeply is to carry light in a darkened world, to recognize patterns of energy that shape destiny, and to stand unshaken amid illusion. The danger is real, but so is the grace, because spiritual awakening is not about escaping the human condition, but transcending it with wisdom, love, and humility. 2. The first danger, isolation. When you begin to see what others can't, you step into a world that feels both liberating and isolating. The noise of small talk begins to fade, and the social masks people wear start to look paper thin. It's not pride, it's perception. You begin to sense the truth behind words, energy behind actions, and intention behind silence. This heightened awareness, while a sign of spiritual development, separates you from the collective illusion. People can feel it when your gaze sees too much. They grow uncomfortable, exposed, almost naked before your intuition. Like actors disturbed by someone who breaks the illusion of the play, they retreat from those who refuse to pretend. Carl Jung warned of this danger, the loneliness of consciousness, the invisible wall that forms when one awakens to what others deny. You start to move through life as an observer rather than a participant, nodding through hollow conversations, laughing without feeling, and playing roles to maintain a fragile sense of belonging. But deep within, your spirit resists. You crave depth, truth, presence. You no longer wish to talk about the weather. You want to speak about the soul. Spirituality strips away your appetite for distraction. It teaches you to see the emptiness in noise and the power in stillness. Isolation begins to feel less like exile and more like sacred preparation. In the silence, your senses sharpen. You feel the vibration of energy in spaces, the emotional signatures of people, the silent messages in the air. The world grows transparent, and while others see only appearances, you perceive the invisible web of consciousness beneath it all. In this solitude, you learn self-sufficiency. You begin to draw nourishment from peace rather than attention, from prayer rather than approval. The loneliness turns into lightness. You discover that your worth no longer depends on being understood, but on being aligned. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that becoming requires detaching from illusions that masquerade as love or belonging. Many will not follow you into that depth. They will stay where their masks keep them safe. But your task is not to pull them with you. It is to honor their journey while continuing your own. The danger of seeing what others can't is not the solitude itself, but the misunderstanding that comes with it. You may be labeled distant, strange, or detached, but in truth, you are simply resonating at a different frequency. You see the hidden pain behind people's smiles, the fear behind their laughter, the truth behind their excuses, and it hurts because you care. But spirituality refines that pain into compassion. You stop judging blindness and start holding it gently, knowing that everyone awakens when they are ready. Isolation, then, becomes a teacher rather than a curse, a crucible through which your awareness matures. The lesson is clear. As your inner vision expands, your external world narrows. Yet this contraction is divine. It is life sculpting you into clarity. The fewer people who understand you, the closer you are to understanding yourself. And in that sacred silence, you realize that seeing what others can't was never meant to isolate you. It was meant to return you home to your own soul. 3. The second danger: self-doubt and inner split. When you begin to perceive uncomfortable truths that others cannot see, you stand at a fragile crossroads between expression and silence. If you choose to speak, you risk being misunderstood, rejected, or even ridiculed by those who are still asleep within their illusions. But if you remain silent, you slowly disconnect from your own truth, betraying the very light that awakened you in the first place. This is the silent battle Carl Jung described: the inner split that occurs when awareness and conformity collide. One part of you knows what is real, while another part is forced to pretend it doesn't, creating an invisible wound that quietly drains your soul. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." When you see beyond the veil of illusions, it is impossible to return to blindness without paying a heavy psychological cost. You begin to live between two worlds, one of truth and one of pretense, and this tension can make you doubt your own sanity. You ask yourself why you perceive what others cannot, why the world resists the very insight that feels so liberating to you. Yet this confusion is not madness. It is the necessary friction of transformation. It is the soul's growing pain as it expands beyond collective limitation. Spiritual wisdom teaches that every awakening comes with an inner test. The moment you see deeply, you must decide whether you will remain faithful to what you know or conform to what the world demands. Doubt will whisper that your vision is wrong, that you are imagining things, that silence is safer. But suppression breeds suffering. It divides your being into fragments, one half carrying truth, the other acting out false peace. And this inner division can become heavier than any external rejection. To heal it, you must learn to stand in integrity, to let your insight breathe even when it is met with disbelief. Carl Jung believed that spiritual awakening was not about escaping the world, but reconciling its opposites within yourself. You must learn to see without arrogance, to know without judgment, to speak truth without resentment. The goal is not to convince others, but to remain whole in your understanding. The spiritually awake are not meant to be loud prophets. They are meant to be steady lights, silent, clear, and unwavering in their truth. So when the pressure of self-doubt builds, remember that your inner conflict is proof of your growth. You are not broken. You are becoming aligned. The world may not yet see what you see, but your clarity has purpose. Every moment you choose truth over comfort, you heal the split within, and that is where real spiritual awakening begins. If this message has opened your eyes to a deeper truth within, take a moment to ground your energy. Comment below. I trust my inner wisdom to affirm your faith in yourself and your spiritual awakening. 4. The third danger, becoming the target. People who resist the truth often turn their discomfort into weapons against the one who dares to see. When you awaken spiritually, your perception becomes too sharp for the comfort of those still asleep. They will call you too sensitive, negative, or paranoid, not because you are, but because your clarity threatens their illusion. Carl Jung described this reaction as shooting the messenger, the mind's instinct to destroy what exposes its shadow. You, the awakened observer, become the target not because of wrongdoing, but because awareness itself is unsettling to those who live in denial. The world prefers its illusions neat and unchallenged, and when someone walks in with light, the first impulse is to shut their eyes and blame the light bringer. It is easier for them to brand you as strange than to face their own hidden pain. Spiritual awakening is not a gentle dream. It's an earthquake of consciousness. It shakes the false foundations on which people have built their comfort. The moment you begin to see beyond appearances, you begin to disturb the energy of those around you. Your vibration no longer matches theirs, and this difference feels like a threat. They sense your authenticity, your piercing calm, and unconsciously, their ego panics. It wants to silence the reminder that truth exists beyond masks. Jung understood that every person carries a shadow, the unseen parts of the psyche that prefer darkness. When your awareness shines too brightly, you reveal what others spend their lives trying to hide. Their defensiveness, mockery, or withdrawal are simply shields against that light. You are not being punished for seeing you are paying the natural price of vision. When others accuse you of being too deep, too intense, or too serious, recognize it as a sign that your presence is working. You are forcing reflection. Jung once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." When your insight provokes resistance, it's not rejection, it's recognition. You've become a mirror, and mirrors make people uncomfortable when they've forgotten what they look like. Spirituality often feels lonely because truth isolates before it liberates. You start seeing through facades, feeling energy where others only see form, and noticing motives hidden beneath words. Suddenly, noise becomes unbearable, small talk becomes hollow, and you long for silence not as escape, but as nourishment. This isolation, however, is not punishment. It is preparation. You are being refined, not rejected. Spiritual awakening demands emotional resilience and self-trust. You must learn to hold the truth gently, without using it to judge or separate. Remember, your role is not to force others to see, but to embody clarity until they choose sight. Let solitude teach you serenity. Let rejection strengthen your discernment. As Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Hold to that privilege fiercely. Even when misunderstood, Your awareness is sacred. It is the evidence of your evolution, the sign that your consciousness has stepped beyond illusion. You may become the target, but in truth, you are the torch illuminating what others fear to face, yet need to see to awaken. If this message has awakened something within you, leave a comment of truth. I see what others can't, yet I choose peace over fear. I trust in my spiritual wisdom. 5. The fourth danger: emotional overload and loss of self. When you step into the path of spirituality and begin to awaken, one of the most dangerous yet invisible traps is emotional overload and the slow, painful loss of your true self. The deeper your spiritual development becomes, the more your empathy expands, and suddenly you start to feel the pain, fear, and confusion of others as if they were your own. Their sadness creeps into your heart. Their anger burns through your peace, and their anxiety clouds your mind. This constant absorption blurs your inner boundaries until you no longer know which emotions belong to you and which belong to the world around you. You wake up exhausted, restless, and unsure why. This is the heavy cost of awakening without protection, when your compassion turns into a magnet for other people's unresolved energies. Carl Jung once warned that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. When you allow too many energies to react with yours, you slowly dissolve into the emotions of others. To truly walk the path of spiritual wisdom, you must understand that being aware does not mean being available to everything. When your energy field is too open, you absorb every vibration around you, and your natural light becomes dim under the weight of collective emotion. Many spiritually awakened souls mistake sensitivity for compassion, but they are not the same. Compassion allows you to feel with others while staying anchored in your own center. Sensitivity without boundaries, however, is like standing in the rain with no shelter. You drown instead of cleanse. Spiritual development requires not only the expansion of consciousness, but also the mastery of energy. The higher you rise, the stronger your foundation must be. Without emotional discipline, awareness becomes a burden, and enlightenment feels more like a curse than a blessing. You must learn the sacred balance between empathy and detachment. Empathy lets you understand the suffering of others, but detachment allows you to remain a mirror reflecting truth without absorbing chaos. Remember, you are not meant to carry everyone's darkness inside your soul. Your purpose is to transform your own, so your light can illuminate the path for others. True spirituality is not about absorbing pain. It is about transmuting it. To do that, you need boundaries strong, energetic walls that protect your essence while allowing love to flow freely. Boundaries do not make you cold. They make your warmth sustainable. You cannot heal the world by letting it bleed into you. So, ground yourself daily. Spend time alone in silence or nature to cleanse your field and listen to your own energy again. Breathe deeply and imagine a radiant light surrounding you, your divine armor, filtering out what doesn't belong to your soul. Take care of your emotional hygiene as you would your body. Release what feels heavy, detach from what drains you, and return to your own vibration. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Awareness must be matched with mastery. The lesson here is profound spirituality is not about becoming everything, but about remembering who you are amidst everything. You can love deeply without losing yourself, sense energy without absorbing it, and see what others can't without being consumed by it. That is the true art of spiritual development. To feel the universe, yet remain whole within yourself. 6. The true danger lies not in seeing, but in fixing. Carl Jung's spiritual wisdom reminds us that the true danger does not lie in seeing what others can't, but in the urge to fix everything we see. When your spiritual awakening sharpens your vision, you begin to notice the hidden wounds, the unconscious motives, and the subtle patterns that govern human behavior. Yet, the moment you try to heal, correct, or save everyone around you, you fall into the very trap that Jung warned against: the illusion of control disguised as compassion. Awareness is a gift, but it is not a responsibility. To awaken is to witness, not to interfere. Like muddy water that becomes clear when left undisturbed, people and situations often find their own balance without your hand stirring the depths. The more you try to force clarity, the more you create chaos. True spiritual wisdom teaches that energy flows where attention goes. And when your attention is constantly on fixing others, you drain your own light instead of expanding it. You may feel called to heal others because you recognize their pain, but healing imposed from ego creates dependency, not transformation. Jung understood that every soul must confront its own darkness in order to awaken. You can offer light, but you cannot carry someone through their night. The privilege of a lifetime, he said, is to become who you truly are. That journey is deeply personal. No one can walk it for another. When you accept this truth, your compassion becomes freer, purer, and less attached to outcomes. You start to see that every person's suffering has divine timing, and your role is not to fix, but to hold sacred space while they discover their own wisdom. The danger of seeing what others can't is that you may mistake your insight for obligation. But spiritual awakening is not about rescuing. It's about remembering that light needs darkness to reveal its brilliance. That pain can be a sacred teacher, and that letting go is sometimes the highest form of love. When you stop trying to control life's unfolding, you realize that stillness is not inaction. It is trust. Like the calm observer watching the water clear on its own, you allow energy to settle into harmony. This is the balance Carl Jung spoke of: to see deeply without losing yourself in what you see. The moment you release the need to fix, you finally embody the wisdom that everything heals in its own time, and that your purpose is not to stir the mud, but to reflect the light. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on learning to see clearly without trying to fix what was never yours to heal. 7. The path to mastery: conscious detachment. True spiritual maturity lies in the art of conscious detachment, the ability to see life with piercing clarity without being consumed by it. Carl Jung, a master of depth psychology, warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. In the journey of spirituality and spiritual awakening, this truth becomes your compass. It reminds you that awareness is not about control. It is about harmony with what is. You begin to see that the moment you release the need to manipulate outcomes, you open yourself to divine flow. You perceive the suffering of others not as something to fix, but as a sacred process unfolding according to its own rhythm. This awareness transforms your vision into compassion. It becomes a gift of freedom instead of a weapon of judgment. As you awaken, you learn that detachment is not emotional distance, but spiritual intimacy. It is loving without ownership, guiding without interference, and witnessing without ego. It is the space where understanding replaces judgment and patience replaces control. Jung understood the danger of seeing too deeply without grounding, how insight without surrender can become a burden. Those who awaken too quickly may feel the weight of others' pain as their own, mistaking awareness for responsibility. But true spiritual wisdom teaches that you are not meant to carry another's cross. Each soul must rise by its own strength. When you stop trying to save everyone, you begin to embody divine compassion, the kind that liberates rather than entangles. You realize that every person's suffering is a lesson shaped by divine design, and by allowing them to walk their own path, you honor their growth and your own peace. This is the silent mastery of the awakened soul. To hold awareness lightly, to know deeply but act gently, to see chaos and still remain still within. You understand that the world does not need more saviors. It needs more witnesses of light, those who can observe the darkness without fearing it. You see now that people project from their level of consciousness, and your role is not to convince, but to reflect truth. You stop explaining yourself to those who cannot hear beyond their wounds, because you know that clarity speaks loudest in silence. And you stop rushing others to awaken, because real light blinds those not yet ready to see. Spiritual awakening strips away your illusion of control until only presence remains. The calm acceptance that life, in all its imperfection, is perfectly timed. The path to mastery, then, is a serene walk between knowing and letting go. It is the sacred practice of seeing the hidden layers of existence without collapsing into them, of recognizing the divine hand in both pain and peace. Conscious detachment does not make you cold. It makes you clear. It does not numb your heart. It refines it. Through this state, your awareness becomes luminous and unbound, a steady flame that illuminates without burning. You become a vessel through which divine wisdom flows, seeing not with judgment, but with love, not with fear, but with faith. In this way, your sight becomes a blessing, your stillness a sanctuary, and your presence a living testimony to the highest form of spiritual wisdom. 8. The importance of boundaries and solitude. To maintain true clarity in spirituality and spiritual development, solitude is not a luxury, it is a necessity. You must retreat into silence, not to escape the world, but to hear the voice within that the world constantly drowns out. When you are alone, you can finally separate what you feel from what others have placed upon you. You begin to sense which emotions truly belong to your soul and which are borrowed from the energy of those around you. In solitude, your spiritual boundaries are restored, like a garden protected once again by its walls. Without this sacred space, your energy becomes scattered, and you start mistaking the emotions of others for your own, losing yourself in the noise of collective confusion. Carl Jung understood this deeply when he said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing, which makes my life worth living." In solitude, you meet yourself again raw, unfiltered, and real. You realize that peace does not come from fixing what is outside of you, but from clearing what is within. Every moment spent alone strengthens your energetic field, Every breath of silence refines your inner voice. But Jung also warned of the danger of seeing too much without grounding, of having such sharp vision that it cuts into your own soul. That is why solitude must not become isolation. It must be practiced as sacred restoration, a balance between the clarity of awareness and the warmth of human experience. When you set boundaries, you protect your soul's equilibrium. You teach others how to treat your energy, and you remind yourself that your inner world deserves respect. Boundaries are not walls that separate you from life. They are doors that open only to peace, love, and understanding. Solitude strengthens those doors. It teaches you when to open them and when to keep them closed. The more you honor your time alone, the more you understand that stillness is not emptiness. It is fullness, overflowing with truth. Through solitude, you see without judgment, listen without noise, and live without distortion. You stop reacting and start perceiving. You no longer carry the burdens of others as your own, because you've learned to return every emotion to its rightful owner. This is the essence of spiritual maturity, the ability to see clearly without being crushed by your own clarity. It is to know deeply, feel deeply, and yet remain unshaken. In solitude, your spirit finds its rhythm again. Your heart remembers its peace, and your mind learns the beautiful discipline of silence. And in that silence, you finally realize that protecting your energy is not withdrawal. It is devotion to the light that lives within you. To honor your growth and protect your peace, declare your devotion to solitude and self-mastery. Comment below, "I protect my energy," to affirm your boundaries and remind others that true spiritual wisdom begins in silence and self-awareness. 9. The transformation from curse to light. When awareness merges with wisdom and compassion, the so-called curse of seeing what others can't turns into a blessing of light. You stop trying to force others to awaken and instead embody the quiet power of awakened presence. This is the transformation Carl Jung hinted at when he said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." You begin to understand that awakening is not about changing the world around you, but about holding your consciousness steady in the midst of it. When you stop trying to convince others, something miraculous happens. Your calm energy becomes the very mirror that helps them awaken on their own. Spiritual wisdom teaches that true transformation doesn't need to be loud. It is felt through presence, through how you move, speak, and breathe in truth. As this realization deepens, your purpose changes. You no longer see yourself as the savior of the sleeping world, but as the one who remains awake within it. You notice that your greatest teaching is not your words, but your energy. Instead of draining yourself, trying to rescue others from their darkness, you honor their timing. Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You see now that your role is not to expose their shadows, but to illuminate your own. The more you integrate your awareness with compassion, the more peace replaces frustration, and the danger of seeing too much transforms into the grace of understanding everything's purpose. You stop seeking validation from those who cannot yet see. You no longer confuse closeness with alignment. The beauty of this path is subtle. Your presence begins to heal without effort. Your silence teaches without instruction, and your truth becomes an invisible balm for weary souls. You start to live by gentle principles: presence over performance, compassion over control, timing over urgency, and boundaries over resentment. You understand that a steady light is far more powerful than a blazing flash. Every breath becomes a quiet declaration of faith that awakening cannot be forced, only reflected. This is what Carl Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming who you truly are. When you embody that truth, you no longer fear being different or alone. Your awareness becomes your sanctuary, your compassion becomes your power, and your peace becomes your protection. The curse of seeing turns to light the moment you accept that your task was never to fix the world, but to live so consciously that the world begins to remember what consciousness looks like. In the end, Carl Jung reminded us that seeing what others can't is both a blessing and a burden. True spiritual wisdom lies not in convincing others of what we see, but in protecting our own vision and nurturing the light within. If today's message has spoken to your soul, remember to like this video, share it with those walking a similar path, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next journey into the depths of the spirit and the mind.